My son auctioned me off for $5. Not as a joke between us, not privately, in front of 400 people at the Peachtree Grand Ballroom in Atlanta. Chandeliers, open bar, $300 a plate dinner. Tony Reynolds stood at that microphone and said, "Last item of the night, folks, lunch with my mother. She's retired. She's got nothing but time. Do I hear $5? The room laughed. I was sitting at table 19, near the kitchen, the table where they put people who don't really matter. She used to work at the county clerk's office, he told the room, still smiling. Great cook, conversation's decent, bid high, get a home-cooked meal. More laughter, then silence, the kind that means everyone heard it and no one wants to touch it. I sat with my hands flat on the tablecloth, back straight, face empty. 63 years of practice at that face. Then a woman stood up from table 11. She didn't reach for a microphone. She didn't need one. $100,000. The room didn't go quiet. It went still. And Tony's grin, that wide, easy Reynolds grin, dissolved off his face like it had never been there. That woman started walking toward table 19, toward me, like she'd been watching all night, like she came here specifically for this moment. And what she said when she reached my chair, I need you to understand what it cost me to still be sitting in it first. Go back with me, 5 years, a kitchen in Decatur, the night I stopped disappearing. The night I decided to stop disappearing, I was washing a casserole dish at midnight. Tony had come for dinner. He'd brought Lexi Houghton, his girlfriend at the time. She sat at my kitchen table and looked around the way people look at a yard sale, cataloging, pricing. She picked up the ceramic rooster on my windowsill, the one my mother gave me, turned it over, set it back down. "It's so cozy in here," she said. Cozy, the word women like Lexi use when they mean small. Tony ate 2 servings of my baked chicken, told me about a deal he was closing, mentioned they were looking at a house in Sandy Springs, pool, 4 bedrooms. Lexi wanted a home office. Then they left at 8:45. I stood at the door and watched his taillights disappear. Then I went and washed the dishes. That's where it hit me. Hands in hot water, sponge moving in circles, thinking about how Tony had called that morning, not to check on me, but because he needed his birth certificate for a refinancing application. "You still have all my documents, right, Mom? You're good at that stuff." You're good at that stuff. I dried my hands, walked to my bedroom, opened the closet shelf, and pulled down a shoebox. Inside, 3 spiral notebooks, 40 index cards, a USB drive, 11 years of screenplays nobody had ever read. I'd started writing them after Tony left for college, quietly, in the margins of my real life. The first 2 were terrible. The third one, a psychological thriller about a Black woman wrongfully convicted in rural Mississippi. I couldn't stop working on that one, couldn't leave it alone. But I'd never sent it anywhere, never told a soul, because Tony's father, Mark, had once said, "Sophia, you don't have the education for that world. You're a dreamer, baby. Dreamers go broke." I sat on my bed with that shoebox in my lap and I thought, I am 60 years old. I have filed papers for that boy. I have made myself smaller than every room I've ever walked into, and I have 11 years of work sitting in a Nike box. I opened my laptop, looked up screenwriting competitions, real ones with deadlines and industry judges and prize money. I found one closing in 8 days. Submission fee, $40. money I did not easily have. I paid it anyway, submitted the screenplay before I could talk myself back into the box. I didn't tell Tony, didn't tell anyone, went back to the kitchen, finished the dishes, went to bed. It was the first night in years I slept all the way through. 3 months later, a woman named Courtney McNeil called me from Los Angeles, production company executive, one of the competition judges. My screenplay had placed second, but she said she'd been thinking about it for 6 weeks and wanted to know if I had anything else. Send them both, tonight if you can. I sent them at 11 p.m. from my kitchen table. She called 4 days later. Sophia, where have you been? I mean that genuinely. Where have you been? I didn't know what to say, so I told her the truth. I was waiting for someone to ask. Courtney McNeil changed my life in increments so small I almost missed them. First came an option deal, a production company paying me for the rights to develop the Mississippi screenplay into a limited series. Not a fortune, enough to pay off a credit card I'd carried for 9 years, enough to buy a laptop that didn't freeze when I opened 2 windows. Then came rewrite work. Studios hire writers to repair scripts in trouble. Courtney started sending my name around. I rewrote a feature for a director who won a Spirit Award that year and thanked everyone in his speech except me. That's how that world works. Then I rewrote a pilot for a streamer I'm still not allowed to name. They paid me more for 8 weeks than I made in 4 years at the county clerk's office. I wrote under a pen name, S.L. Robinson, Courtney's idea. Let the work get established before you become a face. You'll have more leverage. She wasn't wrong. 2 years, quietly building something real, and Tony didn't know a single word of it until Lexi told him. She was at a dinner party in Buckhead, one I wasn't invited to, and a development executive named Shiloh Lang mentioned that S.L. Robinson had just been attached to a project everyone in the industry was watching, said she was local, Atlanta, older woman, mysterious. Something made Lexi ask the right questions. She went home and told Tony that night. He called me at 7 a.m. I was in the middle of a scene. "Mom, are you S.L. Robinson?" I set down my coffee. "Where did you hear that? Is it true?" "Tony, why didn't you tell me?" There it was. Not, "I'm proud of you," not, "How did you do this?" Not even, "What do you write?" Just, "Why didn't you tell me?" Which was really just another way of saying, "How dare you have a life I didn't know about?" I said, "Because every time I tried to talk about my writing, you changed the subject." Silence. "That's not fair." "Tony, the last time I mentioned a project, you spent 20 minutes telling me about a fantasy football league." More silence. Then his voice shifted, got warmer, the way it always does when he needs something. "Mom, this could be really good for the firm. Creative industry relationships are a real growth area right now. If you're connected to those kinds of people, we could—" "Goodbye, Tony." I hung up. He texted 4 times before noon. The last one said, "I just think you could be doing more with this if you had the right support around you." I didn't respond. 6 weeks later, he called with a favor. A fundraiser, the Peachtree Youth Arts Foundation, 400 guests, major donors, civic leaders. Tony was spearheading the whole evening. It was, he said, critical for the firm, for his reputation, for his future. He needed someone to run the logistics, venue, seating, vendors, timeline. "You're good at organizing, Mom. You've always been good at that." I looked at the blinking cursor on my screen, Chapter 9, deadline in 6 weeks. "I have a deadline, Tony." "It's 1 month. You can write in between." "I write constantly. There is no in between." Mom, his voice dropped. Please, this matters to me. 23 years of that voice coiled in my chest like a rope I hadn't cut yet. I said yes. The next 4 weeks disappeared. Vendor calls at midnight, seating charts rewritten 6 times, a catering dispute I mediated on a Tuesday at 10 p.m. Courtney called twice, I rescheduled both times. Chapter 9 stayed frozen at page 43 for 3 weeks straight. 2 days before the gala, I stopped by Tony's office to drop off the final printed programs. The door was half open. Lexi was on the phone inside. I wasn't trying to listen. She's basically his event planner at this point, which honestly makes sense. What else is she doing? I stood in that hallway holding a box of programs. What else is she doing? I set the box inside the door without knocking, walked back to my car, sat in the parking garage for a few minutes. Then I drove home and finished Chapter 9 in one sitting. But I never said a word to Tony about what I heard. Not yet. The room was beautiful, which made it worse, because I'd built it. I picked the florals, ivory and sage, cascading centerpieces, votives running the length of every table. I negotiated the lighting rig for 3 days. I knew the name of every server, the backup plan for the AV system, the direct number of the catering manager. 4 weeks of my life were in every corner of that ballroom, and I was sitting in the back of it, table 19, near the kitchen. Tony and Lexi were at table 1 with the foundation board and the major donors. I watched him work the room before dinner. Handshakes, laughter, that easy Reynolds charisma he'd always known how to aim at the right people and away from me. Lexi moved beside him like punctuation, her hand on his arm, her laugh perfectly timed. They looked like they belonged there. I ate my dinner, made small talk with strangers. A man beside me asked what I did. I said I was a writer. He said, "Oh, like a blogger?" I said, "Sure," and let it go. The auction started at 8. A weekend in Savannah, a private chef experience, a signed jersey that made the crowd erupt. The numbers climbed fast and loud. Tony stood at the side of the room with his arms crossed, watching it all perform exactly the way he'd planned, chin up, satisfied. Then the auctioneer said, "And that concludes our listed items for the evening." And Tony walked to the microphone. That tightening in my chest, his warning system, the one I'd been ignoring for 30 years. "One more item," he said, "a bonus, off the books." Warm laughter, the room leaning in. "Lunch with my mother." He gestured toward table 19 without looking at me. "She's retired, lots of free time, great cook." He smiled at the room like they were all in on something together. "Do I hear $5? Laughter, then quiet, then the specific silence that follows public cruelty, where 400 people are all deciding at the same moment what to do with what they just witnessed. I put my hands flat on the tablecloth. I made my face the color of calm. I gave him nothing. 10 seconds. 15. People looked at their drinks, at each other, at anything except the woman at table 19. One man near the front shifted in his seat. A woman at table 6 looked down at her plate. Nobody bid. Nobody laughed anymore either. Tony's smile was starting to show its edges. Then she stood up. Table 11. Dark blazer, natural hair pulled back, the posture of a woman who had never once been uncertain in a room. Shiloh Lang. The same Shiloh from the Buckhead dinner party 18 months ago, the development executive whose offhand comment on S.L. Robinson had sent Lexi home to tell Tony everything. the woman who had unknowingly pulled the first thread on my secret life. She didn't raise her hand, didn't wait to be called on. $100,000. The ballroom didn't go quiet. It went still. Not the same stillness as before, not the uncomfortable kind, not the pity kind. This was the stillness of 400 people recalibrating at the same moment. Phones came out, heads turned. Someone at table 5 leaned over to whisper to the person beside them, and that person turned to look at me, and then the next person did, and then the next. A slow wave moving through the entire room all the way to table 1, where Lexi's hand gripped Tony's arm, and Tony stood at that microphone looking like a man watching the floor open beneath him. Shiloh walked toward me, unhurried, like she had all night. She stopped beside my chair. She looked at me, not at Tony, not at the auctioneer, not at the room, just at me. "Miss Robinson, I'm Shiloh Lang, VP of Development at Meridian Studios." She set a card on the table in front of me. "I've been trying to reach your representation for 2 months. I apologize for how this looks, but when I found out you'd be here tonight, I took a chance." She glanced once at Tony. Her expression didn't change, which was somehow worse than contempt. "We'd like an answer this week, tonight if you're available." I looked up at Tony. He had gone the color of old concrete. Lexi beside him wasn't touching his arm anymore. She was holding on to it, the way you hold something when you feel the ground moving. A woman at table 2 said out loud, "Wait, she's S.L. Robinson?" Her husband said, "The Mississippi silence writer? That S.L. Robinson?" And just like that, the room that had watched my son put a price on my irrelevance was now full of people who knew my name, my real name, the one I'd been building quietly for 5 years while I filed his documents and fixed his seating charts and said yes when I should have said no. I stood up. I picked up Shiloh's card. I looked at Tony one last time, not with anger. Anger would have given him too much. I looked at him the way you look at something heavy you have finally decided to set down. Then I said, "Let's find somewhere quiet." And I walked out of that ballroom, past table 1, past Lexi, past the florals I chose and the lighting I negotiated, and the life I had been shrinking to fit into someone else's evening. I didn't look back. I turned my phone off at midnight. Not because I was angry. I was past anger. Anger is loud, and I was done being loud about things that deserved silence, and silent about things that deserved to be said out loud. I turned it off because I wasn't finished yet, because Shiloh and I had talked for 2 hours in a quiet corner of the hotel lobby, and by the time I drove home through Atlanta at 11 p.m., I had something I hadn't had in a long time: clarity. I sat at my kitchen table with a notepad and I wrote, not the screenplay, not a letter, just thoughts, what I wanted, what I was willing to give, what I was done giving, what my life looked like from the outside and what it actually was on the inside, and how long I had let those 2 things be completely different without saying a word to anyone. By the time the kitchen window started going gray with morning light, I had 3 pages of notes and 1 decision. I was done making myself the supporting character in Tony's story. He knocked at 8 a.m. Jeans, a pullover, no armor. He looked like he hadn't slept, and he looked younger for it. Not the Buckhead version of my son, not the Reynolds Capital version, just a 34-year-old man standing outside his mother's door, not knowing what to do with his hands. I let him in, poured him coffee, sat across from him, and waited. He didn't manage me, didn't explain himself, didn't do the thing where he reframes the story until he's the reasonable one. He just sat down, put both hands around the mug and said, "You humiliated me." Not a question. "Yes," I said, in front of everyone. "Yes." He looked at the table. Shiloh Lang pulled me aside before she left last night. She didn't yell. That almost made it worse. She just said, "Do you have any idea who your mother is? Not what she does, who she is." And I didn't have an answer. I didn't say anything. Nash found me too, said it showed poor character, said the way a man treats his family tells you everything about the kind of man he actually is. Tony's voice cracked on the last word, just slightly. "I've been telling myself for years that you were fine, that you didn't need me to pay attention because you were just you, steady, always there. I told myself that because it was easier than admitting I just wasn't looking." "You weren't looking," I said quietly. "That's correct." He admitted. "I know. You called my work little. You called it a hobby. You used me to plan an event and then put me in the back of the room like I was furniture you'd borrowed." He flinched. "And before all of that, before any of that, when I first tried to tell you I was writing, when I tried to share something real with you, you changed the subject. Every time. Not once did you ask me what the work was about. Not once did you ask what it meant to me." "I know," he said again, smaller this time. "I'm telling you this not so you can apologize and we move on, Tony. I'm telling you because if anything changes between us, it has to start with you actually understanding what you did, not just that it looked bad in front of your boss, what it did to me." He looked up then. His eyes were wet. He didn't wipe them. "What do you need from me?" he said. "Tell me anything." I had thought about this at the kitchen table at 3 a.m. with my notepad. "I need you to stop calling me when you need something and going quiet when you don't. I need you to understand that my deadlines are real deadlines. My work is real work, not something I do to keep busy, not a hobby, not a phase." I leaned forward slightly. "I need you to read one of my screenplays, not skim it, not watch the eventual show someone else makes from it. Read my actual words and then call me and tell me what you thought." He nodded, wiped his face with the back of his hand. "And Lexi," I said. He went still. "She called me nothing, Tony. She said, 'Remember when she was just nothing?' In a hallway, 2 days ago, while I was carrying programs I'd stayed up until midnight printing for an event I spent 4 weeks organizing for free." The color drained out of his face. "She didn't know you heard that." "No, she didn't." "Mom, I'm not asking you to choose, Tony. I'm asking you to require more. From her, from yourself, from the way your family talks about me when I'm not in the room." I sat back. That's not a lot to ask. It should have never needed to be said. The kitchen was quiet. Outside, a car passed. A dog barked twice and stopped. Tony put his face in his hands for a moment. When he looked up, he looked exhausted and young and genuinely sorry. Not the managed kind of sorry. Not the sorry that's really just discomforted being caught. The real kind. The kind that costs something. "I'm going to do better," he said. "I know that's not enough right now, but I mean it." "I know you do," I said. "That's why I opened the door." He left an hour later. I watched him walk to his car from the window, watched him sit there for a moment before he started the engine, watched him drive away. Then I went back to my kitchen table, opened my laptop, pulled up Chapter 9, the one I'd finally finished the night Lexi said, "What else is she doing?" and read back through the last few pages. They were good, honest in a way my early work wasn't. Something had loosened in the writing around that time, and I hadn't understood why until right now. I opened a new document, Chapter 10. My phone was still off. Courtney would call, Shiloh would call, Tony would text, Lexi would eventually reach out with something carefully worded that I would read once and take my time responding to. All of that could wait 20 minutes. Right now, there was a woman named Sophia Robinson sitting at a kitchen table in Decatur, Georgia, with warm coffee and morning light coming through the window, and a story that was finally being told on her own terms. I put my hands on the keyboard. I started to write. The Mississippi Project went into production 14 months later. S.L. Robinson held the executive producer credit. Her name was first on the call sheet. She dedicated the series to her mother and to every woman who kept writing in the dark.